This is the Knock&Talk show, an LEO first responder veteran podcast, sharing some comic relief from the street.
Hey folks, welcome to the 34th episode of the Knock&Talk show. I, of course, am your host, Patrick Faulkner, and our guest for this episode is a returning guest, Command Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, Dave Nordel. And during this episode, we're going to do things a little bit different for this one. This is going to be a little more serious. We're going to be talking about a subject matter that is heavy on my heart as well as the Chief's heart. And we're going to be talking about mental health for both military veterans as well as the LEOs, first responders, and really anybody that's listening to this, because mental health transcends any one career. But we're going to hear the Chief talk about something called Mission Next and VBOC and some of his own stories. And I get a little personal in this one as well. So you aren't going to want to miss it. This is good stuff. And we'll see you right after this.
Legal Squiggles in pursuit, military in Riverside, coming into the city. No vehicle description on a Washington-plated car. It's incident 2130.
I just love this music. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 34th episode of the Knock&Talk show. I, of course, am your host, Patrick Faulkner, and we have our second return guest here on the Knock&Talk show, Command Chief Master Sergeant Dave Nordel. I am honored to have you the first time on the Knock&Talk show. This is an extreme honor to have you on as a return guest, and I'm going to tell the folks why, Chief. You reached out to me last week and said, "Hey, Patrick, can I come on the show again? I really need to talk about something." And I said, "Chief, yes, sir. Let's make this happen." So, Chief, welcome to the show.
It's not that easy, Patrick. You got to tell the whole story, right?
So it was almost that easy. Almost.
We're all brothers and sisters,
yeah.
And deep down inside, we all have a soft spot. Even the hardest of hard. And so, and I just had my appendix out not long ago, and I think there might be a picture out on the social media of me laying in a hospital bed.
Yeah.
So I see you laying in a hospital bed, and I say,
"Yeah."
I say, "Brother, what's going on?" And you said, "Hey, I'm going to be all right." And we jumped on the phone, didn't we? That's all.
Yep.
This is a great segue to all of this. And we jumped on the phone and we talked about why you were in the hospital and how you're recovering and where you're going to be. And then we kind of digressed into some pretty significant things that have happened to me recently with some of my interactions. Kind of broke some things down, right, into some really understandable things. And then went 3-4 layers deeper into stuff that we've talked about in the past and things that we're passionate about. And really some of the things that is the reason why you have Knock&Talk to start with.
Absolutely.
And this stuff is, I know it's driven around comedy, and we can find some comedy in all of this, especially bonding over. There's nothing worse than a veteran calling a veteran when one of them's in a hospital bed, because it doesn't sound like, "Oh, I'm sorry, and here's your flowers." In fact, It's the exact opposite of that, right?
It is.
Rub
some dirt on it, kid. You'll be fine.
Yeah. Get your lazy XYZ up and out of the bed, and you got better things to do. And I never took you for someone who just lay around all day. So, heaven forbid. So, so that's kind of where we landed. And at the end of that, I think both of us were moved a little bit emotionally, and and I've been really grinding on some things that we'll get into, based on the fact of how long I served, where I served, the leadership positions I had, but more significantly, what the other side looks like. When you get out of the spaceship and you take your first step on the new planet called the civilian world, and that journey that we all go on. And some things happened to me this week that I'm going to share with you today that were pretty significant. And I think it all ties together. So, there's a higher being that moves us, and for some reason, that's where we're at now. So let's get it done.
It certainly feels that way. Going back to what you just said about stepping off the spaceship for the very first time on a new planet. a whole new set of rules, an environment that you are no longer adjusted to and need to adjust to. Um, it certainly feels like a new planet. Some similarities into what you were used to, right? Because you can still breathe the air. The trees are still green. The grass is green. The rocks are brown. The water is wet, but it's different. It's not the same.
You're right. You're right. Yeah, I want to share a couple things with you along those lines that happened to me this week, and then we can talk about that one word that we kind of threw out there. And since you and I talked, I've used it a couple of times, and in some pretty vulnerable situations. The reaction was very for you and I, it would be very satisfying based on how we were thinking the other day. But so we had the talk. I went to a planning session for a community disaster exercise, and in there's a retired Air Force vet. Never knew him. Don't know him. Didn't know him. Didn't even know he was here in Montana. You certainly didn't know he's in Billings. But he just said, I'm a retired Air Force guy, firefighter, that kind of thing. And so, that's an automatic invite, as we talked about. That's an automatic invite that after the meeting, you're going to say, where are you from? What did you do? High five each other and that kind of thing. See if you know anybody the same. And I could tell that something wasn't right. I just, I'm intuitive that way anyway, but I could tell something wasn't right. So once we got through kind of all the cordialities, I asked him some harder questions. Hey, what are you doing? Who are you connecting with? You're in any veteran organizations? And I told him my story. I said, I'm the proud owner of PTSD. I keep my arm around it every day, keep it nice and close, take the energy that it gives me and freaking turn it around and make it something positive. And I've got some moral injuries from combat time and otherwise that will never go away. And so, how are you doing with that? Well, Patrick, that deteriorated into tears. And, the word lonely was used, which we'll get into. And so just before we got on here, I just got back from breakfast with him this morning. We're going to do a couple other things and close the gap on that. All right. And this is what we talked about.
Right.
And closing the gap. Well, simultaneously, I'm on a conference call with a healthcare organization that's regional to the Western United States. And it's a veterans healthcare call, or a veterans call for people that worked within the healthcare system. And some of it is the brotherhood, sisterhood thing of just kind of, hey, what's going on? But some of it was, how do we transition back? How do we make this thing easier? And I thought, oh, they're on it, because this is what you and I talked about, right? They're in it. But they kept falling back on the things that you and I have heard over and over again. Well, my job description as a tank repairman doesn't it doesn't carry over to the civilian force. And when I tell people what I did, the civilians don't understand it. So they think that I'm capable of pushing a broom and I should be doing brain surgery and all those things that go along with that. Right.
Right.
But that's where they stopped. Well, we've been there for years. We've had those conversations for years. You went to TAPS when you got out and they said, wear a tie, stand up straight, say these things and build your resume this way. And for some reason we're supposed to be A-okay. And the elephant in the room, which I did bring up during this conversation, which it got a lot of head nods, which is leading to a coffee with a Marine whose experience at 18 years old in the United States Marine Corps was living in Fallujah, Iraq during that whole big operation. To include him sharing with me on the chat. We don't even know each other. He lives here in Billings too. Sharing with me on the chat that his gunny sergeant, that he considered the only person even close to a father that he had growing up, committed suicide 2 years after he retired. And so you're laying in a hospital bed and we're having a conversation about being institutionalized, right?
Yes.
So if somebody's in prison for 40 years and you take them out and you drop them in the middle of, downtown Jackson, Mississippi, or Tallahassee, Florida, or San Diego, California, or Bangor, Maine, odds are that person's going to rob a bank and go back to jail in a week, because that's what they know. They don't have any skills. There's no halfway house. There's no place to reassimilate. And yeah, somebody might have shoved some money in their pocket and said, a guy like you, the best jobs that you can get are, at fast food stores. So go see if you can get started there. Right. And that's not what you know, and you want to go back. Well, when we get out, it doesn't matter if it's 2 years, 2 minutes, or 40. When we get out, it's the same thing. And people will say, there's Wounded Warriors and there's the Veterans Administration and there's all of these things. These are big, cumbersome institutions. And so this week also, my therapist, who works with a lot of military guys, she's an immigrant from war-torn Armenia, and she's just wonderful. The perspectives are so close to some of the things that we experience. And she asked me, she said, "Why are people lonely? Why are we lonely?" Remember, we used that
Yeah.
word.
Yeah, we
And when
did.
I used that word in this group the other day, it was almost like I took this big giant rock off of everybody's shoulder, and they said, "Oh, somebody gave me permission to talk about this." And then
Yeah.
boom, the whole room just blew up, right?
I bet the floodgates just opened.
Oh, I mean, my private chat blows up, and it's like, "What can I do to help? I'm here. I need help. Give me a call." I'm trying to get people's phone numbers, and I'm one guy, but this is this deeper discussion that we have to have. And so my therapist says to me, she goes, "Well, why are you guys wandering around lonely?" She goes, "I know people that they do certain things, and there's nonprofits and all of this goodwill and people wanting to do things. So why are you guys lonely, quote unquote?" And I said, "Well, I said, number one in my book, and some people that listen to this may disagree, and I hope we can get a lot of people to listen to this. They may disagree, but it comes down to trust, right? We were so trust based. You got to trust the guy in the foxhole. You got to trust the guy that you're sharing your rack with on a ship. If you're in a submarine, you got to trust everybody because they lock you in. You don't have a choice to get down there and worry about race and gender and creed and all those other things. You have trust, right? And you
That's
work
right.
on trust. So when you get out and somebody hands you a manual, right, and they say, "Here's this manual. This is everything that we can do for you," and you read the manual, and on page 7 it says, "If you were in this operation at this time and you have this kind of medal, you qualify to get this kind of care or this kind of benefit." And you show up to get it, and they don't do it. That's it. We're done.
Yeah.
There's no, "Oh, I understand. I'll be back. Yeah, okay. Yeah, 6 months doesn't sound like too long. I'll be patient." No,
Nope.
because we need it now. And
That's right.
when we're done, we're done.
Yeah.
There's no cat. You can't go back to the barracks and go, "Man, I got screwed on this deal." Your battle buddies are gone, your shipmates are gone, your fellow Marines are gone, your airmen, your wingmen are gone, right?
Yep.
And so it gets lonely. Well, we always have 3 friends, right? Those of us that have come out of public service at whatever level that have any type of trauma, or we're starting to feel lonely because of this institutionalized environment, the spaceship that we've stepped off of, we start to feel lonely. There's always 3 counselors that are readily available at any point in time. And that's John and Jimmy and Jack, right?
Yes, right.
And so we go have relationships with those 3 guys, and they take away the pain for a little while. And for your listeners that may not drink or don't drink whiskey, that's Johnny Walker, Jim Beam, and Jack Daniels, right?
3
And
horsemen.
so, right. And so we lean on that, and that might lead to even more aberrant things like drugs or other things, and then you can really get in a rabbit hole
Yeah.
and end up in a life space that's homeless and those type of things, all the way to suicide, and the 22 a day. And I get asked all the time, "Well, why the 22? What happened to them? Are these straight foxhole guys that lost a buddy right next to them, and these horrific, the things that we should never be visually exposed to in life?" And the answer to that is some of it, yes. And I'm going to meet some of those people this week that are a little closer to that. But it doesn't mean that the moral injury and the traumas don't come from other things, not outside of that direct military thing that we put there, to include our families and everybody else, right? So now we got this empty space. We're bouncing around in it. Most of us still probably have trouble with transparency, vulnerability, and our egos. So we can't fully be open, which I was wide open on this call the other day with people that I didn't know. And the head nods, I mean, you could just see, my computer just blew up because people were like, "Oh my goodness, what do I need to do?" Because the days of going to the VFW and drinking beer till you can't see straight, and every second guy in the VFW is a Marine sniper. I don't think anybody ever did logistics or personnel. Um, so there's our giggle for the thing, right? You go to the VFW and you go, "What did you do?" "I was a Marine sniper. I was a Marine
That's right.
sniper." Right? And then usually one out of those 20 can actually produce something in the form of a badge or a story or a unit that really makes them a Marine sniper. And I actually met a Marine sniper this week at a business thing. He did 14 years in the Marine Corps, was so busted up he got out, so he didn't even do his last 6, just
Oh,
because.
wow.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
This is heavy stuff. And
Yeah.
we had this same conversation, and he goes, "There's nothing out here for us, Dave." He goes, "We got to work on our own." He goes, you got to be your own boss." And I said, "Well, even when you're your own boss, you still have to navigate the civilian world." So
Yeah. And sometime to that point, being your own boss, you have to navigate it even more delicately because you're the one they're answering to,
right,
right? You're not
right,
answering to anybody else other than your responsibilities, your bills, your family, whatever.
right,
But you're having to deal with those people who may not have had any military service, any
right.
government service, and you definitely have to navigate that super careful because if you come in with that ego that a lot of us you alluded to that a lot of us carry around, we are 6 foot tall, we're bulletproof. Um, you're going to turn away a potential customer, and then you're like, well, screw that guy. I didn't need him anyway. But you could have had the sale if you knew how to navigate this. And this goes back to that point you were making out of taps. During our phone call, I briefly described my out processing in 1998, coming out of the Air Force after 4 years. I had one day, I had 8 hours where I was in a conference room with I think 4 or 5 other people that were out processing that same week. We had 8 hours, and they gave us our AFSC on one piece of paper and all the things that we did right at our 5 level or 7 level, whatever they were, and then they gave us a piece of paper that had um, terms translated. Now, here you go, Airman. Write your resume. Well, I have no resumating skill writing, none whatsoever. I turned a wrench for 4 years, a speed handle. I was doing ops checks um, in South Georgia in the swamp, fighting off mosquitoes for 4 years. I have no idea how to write a resume, and so it was like translating Latin, like I did in high school, word for word, sentence for sentence, right?
Yeah.
Do. And you take that and you give that to a potential civilian employer or a hiring manager, and they're like, next.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's take that one step further because you're spot on. So that's the first phenomenon. The second phenomenon is when they actually hire you.
Oh, yeah.
That's when this. So as I was telling the folks, I said I couldn't. I wrote a blog the other day. People go to my website. You're going to put that up later. Go to my website. There's a blog page on there. If you read it, it's the very first blog on the blog page. And the blog talks about how today, as of right now, I am smarter than the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the senior enlisted advisor to the chairman and all the service chiefs and all the senior enlisted people in every service. I'm smarter than them in one area. And it's this phenomenon about what happens after you get out of uniform. Because you don't know. You can speculate and the old cliche thing, take care of your family, because when you take off the uniform, it's the only thing left, and blah. We've said all of that stuff. I heard it all. I said it myself. I had people like you coming to me at 4 years and saying, "Hey, Chief, I'm getting ready to retire. What should I do?" Take care of your family, take your terminal leave, those kind of things. If I could have gone and then came back, the advice would have been take every bit of your terminal leave. Do not jump into a civilian position. Take a deep breath and truly find what you want to do. And then you need to unblue yourself, ungreen yourself, unnavy, unmarine yourself, right? Because you're going into their world. So when the civilians start to listen to this podcast, they may have shut it off already because they think they're going to bash them. They're not. There's nothing wrong with
No.
civilians. It's they know what they know. So here's the phenomenon. You go to basic training or you go to OCS or whatever, they give you a transmission change. And in that transmission, there's two really, really high gears, but you really only run in the top gear from that time until the time you get out. The only time you really downshift, and that may be 1 or 2 gears, the only time you really downshift is when you're on leave or in between assignments. It's the only time you really take a deep breath, right? Well, when they let you out, they don't give you the old transmission back.
No.
And you don't even understand the other gears in the gear kit. You have them, but you don't understand them. So you go into an organization, you're going 1,000 miles an hour. You show up at 5 o'clock, even though the day starts at 7:30. You do the 2.5 hours of work because you know you need the quiet time to do that, or you need to walk around with somebody because you need to assess whatever you're doing. You stay about an hour late most days because that's just kind of what you do, and you want to clean things up because you know what it's going to look like tomorrow morning, so you're prepping for the next day. You get up early on Saturday morning and you knock out the little bit of filtered batch of emails that came in late on Friday so that you're really prepped for Monday. And you probably check those emails late on Saturday and maybe even early Sunday morning. And then before you go to bed on Sunday night to make sure you're ready. And then you're there first thing Monday morning. So you really put in about a day and a half longer than everybody else. And you kind of pat yourself on the back and you're really comfortable at that speed and you're going really well. And you turn around to somebody and you go, we military people are a huge asset to this organization. And they turn around and they say, no, actually, we think you're a huge ass because you don't need to work that hard. You're embarrassing us. Are you trying to show us up? What's your problem? I've heard them all. I've heard them all. Well, automatically, kaboom, blow to your self-confidence. Now you've got to do some sort of manipulation of this transmission that you don't understand. And so now you've got to try and downshift. What happens? You feel like you're trading off your values.
Yeah.
As soon as you start not feeling true to yourself and trading off your values, you've lost interest in the institution that you're in. You start to lose your self-confidence. You really want to go back. My wife said to me last night, she goes, why do you think guys did 2nd and 3rd combat tours in Vietnam? Because they liked it? No, it's because it's the only place they could stay sane.
Right.
Because the safe real world was worse. They would rather have gone back.
Yeah.
And so, but we can't go back. Unlike the prisoner who can go rob a liquor store and go back in an hour, we can't. There's a little Shawshank Redemption thing going on in here, right?
I was going to mention that. Yeah.
And so you can't go back. This in here lies maybe the mystery. We want to know why do we got 22 a day killing themselves, and why are probably 2 of the 22 where you can draw a direct corollary to the foxhole, to the outpost, these harder core things, or draw it all the way back to my experiences of, helicopters with babies on them and a lot of our guys and gals not doing so well, so somewhere in that chain, we've all got something. But there's a lot of other things that go along with that besides those things.
Yeah. So I think I mentioned on that phone call, my 2 cents worth in the Second World War, when the troops were coming home. How did they get home? They got home on a boat. How long did that boat ride take? It took months. So they had months to decompress, share the stories, cry, hug, drink, eat, fellowship, work out a lot of that stuff. And when they got home, they were better mentally prepared for that next step, right? Since then, it's like a 12-hour airplane ride.
If that.
If that, depending on where the theater was or is. And then your wheels down and you're right in the thick of it.
Yeah.
And out of that 12-hour, 18-hour plane ride, you probably slept the best sleep you've had in a long time on that plane. So you've cut out even more of that decompression time that you may have had you, stayed awake and shot the shit with a homer to your left or a homer to your right. But even then, we're comparing hours to weeks or months. And then to our previous point, if that was their last deployment, that their last theater, now they're out processing.
Yeah.
There is no decompression time. There's no help. There's no assimilation time
Nothing.
to go from soldier, Marine, airman, sailor, coastie,
Spaceman.
spaceman,
Guardians.
guardian to civilian. There's that time to go from civilian into the military, whatever branch, and they spend months.
6, 8 weeks, 12 weeks. They do that.
They do.
That's why they hold you up for that long.
And nothing to go out.
Yeah.
A class, an 8-hour class to teach you how to write a resume that translates word for word,
Yeah.
military speak, assumed civilian counterpart word.
Right.
Off you go, airman. See you later, Marine.
And if you think about why we have a VFW, because World War I and World War II, we fought with millions of guys, right?
Yeah.
Handfuls of women. There's women involved in that, but there's mostly men. When they came back, when those wars were over with and they came back, you couldn't throw a rock in your hometown without hitting a veteran.
Right.
The streets were full of them, right?
Yeah.
So somebody said, hey, how much does it cost to rent that big building over there? Somebody throw a bar in there, and hey, we're all gonna go bowling on Tuesdays and veteran night on Thursdays, and they congregated and they continued to have a place to go to renormalize.
Somebody was using their noodle.
Well, and it was easy because you had mass, right? You had the people. We melt into the wallpaper.
Oh yeah.
And the guy that I had breakfast with this morning, he said, there's no Air Force people around here. And he says, and other veterans are that hard to find. And I said, actually, they're not. And then if you look at the license plates around here, you'd know they're not. What's hard to find is a gathering place. What's hard to find is a conversation behind how you doing, brother, the picking that we do on each other, especially inter-service type stuff. But there's no place. Now, this needs to be worked on. There's a nonprofit called Mission Next that's out of, majority of guys are out of Mississippi. There's some in Texas. A lot of them are, the majority of them are retired officers. And they've got some ideas and some designs on this. And that's one to look up. You look up Mission Next, and they're working on a few things, but a focus on this because they've got doctors in there and they've got former wing commanders in there and, Army, platoon leaders. And there's a variety of folks that are involved with that. And I've talked to them because some of them I know from my time. One of them was my next door neighbor for a while. And so they're focused on figuring out what this bridge of courage is, right? So where's the bridge? Instead of when you close the DOD door behind you and you turn around and your feet are on a ledge about that big, right? About the width of your boots. And then there's this chasm. And that chasm is the gap. And how do you close that gap? So let me give you an example of something that I think it works, but it only works in its area. I just had a conversation with the director for the Northeast of the VBOC. If you don't know what VBOC is, it's a Veterans Business Opportunities Council, all right? And they're all over the nation. So I'm going to get out. You get referred to the VBOC. You tell them I want to be a farmer. I want to be a fisherman. I want to be a franchisee. I want to own my own welding shop. And they say, okay, well, here's how you set up a business. And right down from here's how you do an LLC or sole proprietorship or your nonprofit. And here's how you get small business loans. And here's how you work within your community. And they give you these resources for free. And, here, talk to this lawyer. You get 30 minutes with a lawyer for free and all those kind of things to do that.
Okay.
So you start your business and you're into your business for a year and they write you a note and say, hey, how's your business going? And you say, oh, everything's good. And they say, great, glad to hear from you. And we'll check back. And then 18 months later, you're having a really hard time with getting a loan to buy seed to grow corn or whatever the heck it is. Well, you call back to the VBOC and you say, hey, I went through the program 18 months ago. I started my business. I'm kind of stuck right here. What do you think? And they go, hey, here's a number. Here's a phone number. Here's a resource. Here's somebody that'll help. Sometimes they actually solve your problem for you. And you go back,
Wow.
where is that on the reassimilation? So I'm a fan of systems that work. I'm not a fan of just building systems to have jobs programs or to generate money. I'm a fan of systems that work. So there's a couple things. One is, and I think we've talked about this, there's things out there called mental health first aid and QPR training, which is question, persuade, and respond. So QPR training is no different than Annie, are you okay? You dial 911 and you start doing CPR. It's the same thing for mental health. Okay. Mental health first aid is no different than, oh, he's hurt his arm. The blood is spurting. It's arterial blood. Let me put direct pressure on it for mental health. Right. We have a system for that, right? It's
Right.
called CPR and first aid and AED training. So why don't we take all of those things, hang them on the existing systems, and then make the average everyday person that doesn't deal with this or doesn't have mental health problems or is scared to intervene in mental health issues the same as the same person that will do CPR on somebody they don't even know in a mall or a restaurant, right? So why aren't we there? Well, the VBOC has all of these systems. So when you go into the VBOC and you say, I'm a veteran and I want all these things, one of the pillars and one of the stops is hey, you're going to sit and talk with Patrick and Dave, and we're going to say, here's some of the challenges that you're going to face as you walk out into the civilian role. There's going to be times where you're going to feel lonely. I had a Marine on that call yesterday. He goes, I was a Marine from 94 to 98. I was only, I hate when I hear that. I was only in for 4 years. That's enough. I was only in for 4 years. And he goes, I had an awful time, Dave. He goes, I had some really, really low points where I was very, very lonely. He goes, you're right. That might be the first time that guy's ever said that out of his mouth in an open forum. Lonely's an embarrassing word. When you tell people you're lonely, it's a powerful word. You know,
Yeah.
it's like calling somebody a quitter. You know, that's a powerful word too.
Yeah.
And so we have these systems out there, but we're reluctant to hang some of these things off of the systems. And I think it's only because the people that control the systems, right, that think that they've got this figured out, aren't out of uniform. The solution has to come from us. If we're going to wait for the federal government, the state government, or some large nonprofit to solve this problem, it won't. You got to solve it. You got to solve it where you're at, and I got to solve it where I'm at. It has to be grassroots, and it has to be done. I talked to our Veterans Navigation Network guy here. He's a retired Air Force first sergeant. Great guy, working his tail off. They're so busy. They got so much demand on the programs from our veterans. And I talked to him about this, and he goes, absolutely. He goes, we'll hang it right off of our program. We just got to be able to build it. So, yeah. So, you know, I'm going 1,000. I'm going 1,000 miles an hour here and kind of dominating the narrative. But so what do we do next? What does that look like? You know, I kind of ran this by somebody who is a total civilian, knows nothing about the military, and like a good civilian, there was concern. There's some empathy there. His first question was, well, how are you going to fund it? I guess, you know, money is everything. I think, but I think if you work things locally and you can articulate this the right way and you can get aligned with existing systems, it's pennies on the dollar. Yeah. What's expensive to fund is starting from scratch, right? So if you say, I'm going to open up an ambulance service, it's not very expensive to run once you have all the paramedics and the ambulances and all the equipment that goes along with it. You know, on a day-to-day basis, it's fuel and human resources, paychecks, right?
Right.
But to start it, it's $800,000 ambulances, and you know, I'm probably exaggerating, $200,000 ambulances, and all the equipment and training and everything that goes along with it. If you use the existing systems, you don't have to build that kind of infrastructure. So I think that, you know, we need to really look at, one, we've got to call it what it is, define it, and recognize it as real, which all you got to do is get a room full of veterans, have a guy like me stand up in front of them and say these words that I've been saying. And then all the heads are nodding. And everybody's like, yep, I've been lonely. Yep. And now it's okay to say it. So we got to do that first. Like I told the Marine the other day, I said, you know, if we don't say this stuff out loud, we're going to continue to lose people. Yes. So that's number one. Number two is that it's okay to have PTSD and be screwed up. And you know what? My PTSD isn't better than your PTSD. Your PTSD might be more traditional in the sense of, because people think shell shock. I mean, that's what PTSD was, right?
Right.
What's wrong with Bill? Well, when he came back from the war, he had shell shock and he's never gotten better. Well, he had PTSD, right? And so people associate it to shell shock. Well, I'll share something. This is a little glimpse into the next two books that are coming out. One of them's a co-written book with 11 other veterans, and each veteran gets to write their own chapter. So there's no genre to the book. It's just veterans talking. And so I chose to write a chapter about moral injury and where that can come from. And I'm not going to belabor the whole story, Patrick, but I will tell you that in Iraq, we were getting ready to do a major operation into Sadr City because they were really shelling the green zone pretty hard in 08, and it was getting annoying. And so we had to go in and get them. So Sadr City had a laydown that was not dissimilar to Fallujah or Ramadi as far as going door to door and those kind of things. So it was going to be hairy. Doctrine in the medical world, and you got to remember, I was the chief of the main trauma center for all of Iraq. So that made me kind of the senior enlisted medic for the country, for the theater. Doctrine is to clear all the beds before you do that. Empty everything out, fly everybody out, get everything empty, right? So you're at stack, so that you've got space for whatever's going to come from the casualties that go along with it. In that mix, we had probably a dozen Iraqis that were in our intensive care unit that were intubated, right? So we're keeping them alive. Or they're on life sustaining equipment. The only way that we could move them was to move them to Baghdad to Iraqi hospitals. Well, to do that meant that the Iraqis would pull those tubes out of them, and if they didn't survive, which they wouldn't, if they didn't survive, then they just drove them straight to the morgue because they just didn't have the space, the time, or the resources to do that. So the doctrine says clear the beds. The morality, the values say you can't euthanize people to clear the beds. So we cleared the beds, Patrick, and we sent them to Baghdad, and what I described happened, and we never did the operation.
Mm. Wow. That's a lot to carry.
And I'm on the senior leadership team. You think we were all congruent on what we should do? Doctors, nurses? No. It was absolute living hell. It's absolute living hell. Screaming, yelling, congressmen, phone calls, I won't, disobeying direct orders. So you bring all that back. That's a whole other form, right? Not a single boom, not a single bomb. The guy next to me didn't get blown up in a house barn, and watched him die right in front of me or worse. But that's just as bad. That's one thing. That's just one thing. So all of us could have got something similar to that.
To take this out of just the military world, put this in a law enforcement world. Your average Joe Schmo copper, flatfoot, in a 20-year career experiences something around 700 critical incidents. That's just one person. That's just one 20-year lifespan, and that's the average. So you've got some that's more, you've got some that's left. I recently shared this on a previous podcast for the first time. I'll say it here because I think it's relevant. This past year, I was diagnosed with a form of depression and a form of PTSD and accumulative trauma over the critical incidences that I experienced on the road as a patrolman, as a detective, as a canine handler, and as a patrol sergeant. I was in the Air Force. I never saw combat. The old joke is, I got paper cuts from pushing papers, or tendonitis in my elbow from the speed handle. Ha, 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 right? And I'm okay with those. One of the reasons why I joined the Air Force was I didn't want to get shot at. But I got shot at as a cop. I was pinned down for probably 15 minutes behind a dumpster in the back of a commercial property, calling in for backup because somebody with a rifle somewhere in the wood line had me dead to rights. I've been in fights for my life. That started off as just a fight to gain custody of somebody, get them in custody, handcuffed. That turned into them wanting to kill me because that's what I wanted to do. I've scrambled for a gun that bad guy pulled out of his waistband as I was chasing him, and I was 3 yards from him closing that gap, and he turns around, and thankfully gun didn't go boom, and we fought on the ground for that. I mean, I've dozens of other stories that aren't funny, that aren't romantic, of law enforcement, that are part of that critical incident accumulative that I've been carrying on. I mean, as a special victims detective, I had 4 and 5-year-olds tell me things about sex that I didn't even know was possible.
Yep.
Coming from their mouths, from their experience,
Right.
That carries a toll. That
Yeah.
poor kid never had a shot.
Yeah.
Or those kids never had a shot. So yeah, this conversation transcends just camouflage.
Yeah. I'm glad. I'm so glad you went there, because I was just getting ready to say, man, Patrick, you were a cop. I was just just before you started to do that, I was going to say, and Patrick, you were a cop. You know what? And there's certain levels of trauma out there. You know, for anybody listening to this, there's certain levels of trauma out there. You know, like I said, my trauma is not better than your trauma, or more significant, or more relevant, or any of that type of stuff. It's just a thing. I don't want humans to feel sorry for themselves or say I've got trauma and then not do. You know, that's why I flipped this around on my head. Number one is, when the alcohol went away and the clarity came back, it made it much easier to make friends with PTSD and what was going on. Because when you take away the numbness, the cloudiness, then you can understand it. And then you understand what it does to you. And if you don't like what it does to you, then don't let it do that. And if
Right.
if it drives a lot of energy is what you use it for. You know, fire is energy. We use fire for a lot of things. It also
Yes, we
burns
do.
down stuff, right?
Yes, it does.
And so we as humans have the ability to overcome. But what I will tell you, I just got back. The wife and I took a trip to Malaysia.
I saw the
Lived in
pictures.
I'm from Borneo. Lived in the jungles with orangutans and proboscis monkeys and uh, rare species of animals that can only be found there on Earth. And we got our certificates because we got so many leeches on us that we donated a little blood before we left. And so we went through that whole thing. It was a real experience. And one of the things I walked away from that with was, when you're out in the wild with things like proboscis monkeys, you can't see anywhere except in Borneo, where we went. They don't live anywhere else, and they don't
Wow.
do well in zoos. So you're probably not going to see them in zoos because they can't recreate the habitat. So that's it. That's the only spot on the planet. And when you watch their family sets and how they work, even the dominant male understands that if the bottom of the rung brand new baby is not taken care of, and how that ecosystem works, that all of them are going to perish if the greater whole is not working together to take care of itself. And now we have humans. And I think we've got that all wrong. And so we let people be lonely, and we let them wander around, and we don't make their problems our problems. And I'm not saying everybody's problems need to be our problems, but I guarantee you that if somebody grabs their chest tomorrow while you're at the grocery store, turns white, gets sweaty, and falls over, and their heart stops beating, you're going to do CPR. Not even think twice about it.
Nope. Spring into action, muscle memory.
Yes, you're just going to do it. When this country gets to the point where they can't tolerate the amount of suicides, what is it, 40 some odd a day, I don't know how many thousands a year. That's civilians and everybody mixed. I just did some data work on it. When our country gets to a point, or somebody that commits suicide is significant enough in our society, gets to a point where they say, well, this is just too much and we don't have any control over it. All of a sudden, we're going to invent CPR or a fire extinguisher. They invented fire extinguishers because the firemen said we don't ever get to the fire on time. You know, if somebody here had this thing, if somebody here had a canister that had some water in it, we wouldn't have to fight the fire. We'd show up and it'd almost be out, or it would be contained to the point where we could put the rest of it out. So we started inventing fire extinguishers. Well, guess what? We've got a fire problem. It's called mental health on a variety of levels. We've got certain subsets of our cultures, especially in the United States, that have huge mental health problems. You know, and we know it, and we only react to the outcome. We don't plan or prepare in a leading way. We operate off lagging indicators. So far too often, in my command chief days, if we stood over the figurative dead body one more time and scratched our heads and said, we need to have a group get together and have a long discussion as to why Billy, Joey, or Jane killed themselves. And I would go into the rooms and I would say, my first question on Patrick was always, where did they kill themselves? And they'd say, why does that matter, Chief? And I said, it all matters. I said, when a guy's mad at his wife, he kills himself in her closet, in her clothing closet. When a guy's mad at work, he kills himself at work. When a guy's mad with an institution, if he's mad with a person, he'll go kill himself in their office. Whatever it is, that stuff matters. And so when you look at that, that's where we start drawing the lines back to, oh, well, we should have known this and we should have known that. I think we knew. I'm not giving anybody a buy on that anymore. I'm not giving anybody a buy to ignorance. I think we knew. I think that we just need to find the courage to close the gap. We make a lot of assumptions. That's another one of my keynotes, and it has a mental health piece to it, but it also has just a societal norming piece. Our military barracks is 25 yards long.
Right.
I was a squad leader, I was leading somebody in the United States Air Force when I'd been in for about 37.2 seconds. I had 12 guys, right, to worry about. And I was in bed 1. So bed 2 was the dorm chief. So in theory, I had to take care of the dorm chief too, which was weird. And I could stand in bed 1, first bed inside the door. I could stand at bed 1 and look at bed 12 in my flight, in my squad, and make a lot of assumptions about the airmen in that bunk. Piles of them. Good, bad, indifferent. They might be in pain. They might not be in pain. Why? He's got a limp and he actually doesn't have a limp. That's just the way he walks. Whatever it is, you got all of that stuff. Make an assumption. If I don't walk the 25 yards or he doesn't meet me to 12 and a half at 12 and a half or 20 and 5, if you don't close that 25 yards, we make so many assumptions and we guide, lead, direct ourselves and direct the people around us, and we react to things based on assumptions. And I'll bet you every one of my pension checks from now until the day I die, that all of those assumptions, not a single one of them is 100% correct.
No, probably not.
But
Nope.
We're comfortable there. That 25 yards is full of all kinds of fear and pain, especially when the other person doesn't look like you, Patrick.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, I know. I was an element leader as well. Element 2.
Well, there you go. And you had a little badge on your chest that said you were an element leader. And it made you stick out, and you didn't. And then you couldn't even be part of the brotherhood when you first started out because nobody liked you because you were telling them what to do.
Nope,
and you were.
nope.
There's nothing worse than being a peer leader. That is the absolute worst job on the face of the planet.
Yeah, and I was the only one in my flight that stayed an element leader the entire 6 weeks. We went through 3 dorm chiefs. I don't even know how many other element leaders, but I was the only one that stayed one the whole time. And no, I didn't have very many friends.
Yeah. So, but you probably, I'll make an assumption. You can validate my assumption. We'll close the 25 yards, right?
Close it up.
So I think that the reason that you stayed an element leader for the entirety of basic training was because either inherent in you or the way your values were, you weren't clouded by fear and pain at the point that you couldn't have a conversation with the 12 guys you were in charge of.
That's probably pretty fair. Yeah. My father and grandfather and uncle, who all servicemen, prepared me for basic training, and then my raising. My dad raised us in a military style household, and I was older. I was 20. My first day of basic training was my 20th birthday, so I was older than half of the people in there that were coming straight out of high
Right.
school.
Right.
So that probably had something to do with it too.
Right. Right. And so you built relationships and you knew stuff about people. And so, there was a level of trust there where they probably followed you a little bit better and you made better decisions based on what you knew. Well, now, so think about the person that's across the room. So I meet with this first sergeant the other day from the Veterans Network. And so this is we'll get a laugh out of this yet.
Okay.
So
All
he
right.
walks in, it's lunchtime. We're having coffee, late afternoon lunch, late afternoon coffee. And he's on time, but I'm early. So I just kind of see him and I wave and he gets his coffee and he's coming over. He's got a book in his hand. He looks like his first sergeant without, in civilian clothes. He's got a notebook and everything in his hand, and I'm kind of smiling. And I can see on it, and I know him. This is not the first time I've met him. I can see it on his face, right? So he sits down and said, "How's it going?" And his head kind of bobbed and he goes, "Well, it's going." And I said, "Oh, I can see it on your face." And he says, "See what?" And I said, "That looks like you've got 3 DUIs and a promotion ceremony at the end of the day." The old first sergeant thing. And he laughed, right? He goes, "Yeah, I guess it's kind of like that, because they were that overwhelmed." Patrick, most people would have seen it, but they wouldn't have said anything.
Right.
And I gave him permission to offload a little bit onto me, right? What if the answer to that would have been, "I'm sick of life"?
That probably would have been more than one coffee.
Right. But look at your reaction. I mean, you even exhaled, right? And you're trained in this. I mean, you had fellow cops that were ready to go home and stick their own revolver in their mouth. I know it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you do with that? Well, here's the deal. For the same reason that you would do CPR is the same reason that you wouldn't intervene with the guy that says, "I'm about done with life," because you don't have any basic training.
Right.
People in the 50s and 60s stood around and said, "Gosh, he just laid there and we all really wanted to do something, but we didn't know what to do." We started teaching people CPR, and then they were doing stuff. And can you believe it? For over 5 years now, the tools with a book, it looks just like the CPR book. When you go to CPR class, with a book, mental health first aid, QPR training, that stuff all exists. Look it up. mentalhealthfirstaid.org. I mean, it's a corporation, it's a company. You can get trained to train it.
Wow.
Why is that not institutionalized all over our country through that?
I don't know. Why am I just now hearing of it?
Right. And why is that not in the Department of Labor, the Department of Human Health and Services, the Veterans Administration? Why is that not in there? Why is that not fully funded? And why is that not hanging on the existing systems? It's pennies on the dollar. If you have to have fire extinguisher training and CPR, why are you not getting mental health training? Because once you understand it and you're not scared of it and the fear and pain goes away, then you do ask the question.
Yeah.
And when you ask the question, this is what happened to me in a parking lot 2 days ago. I think that the next time I meet this guy, I'm going to find out that I might have been that 5-minute block between two decisions.
Right. I bet you're right.
Well, he did write me a note, and he said, "For some reason, you ended up in the right space at the right time that I needed." He didn't elaborate
Funny how
on
that
it,
works.
Yeah. So we're all in that space every day. Mm-hmm. And I'm on the other side of it to the point where I know I've got it, and I'm not perfect at it. And a couple of weeks ago, I had some really dark minutes, but I had the things, I had the people, and I had the things, right? And even in the darkest of that time, I still kind of knew this is a time. It's not the time, and worked my way back out of it. So I'm not perfect either, but but as long as I keep practicing what I preach, I usually end up in a pretty good spot. So, yeah, I mean, you know, we ended up here on this second podcast, not out of necessity, or not the fact that you said, hey, I need to do another podcast with Dave. Let's pick up the phone, see what he's got. We ended up here, Patrick, because you were in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
The conversation had nothing to do with this. I was just checking on you, brother. It's that easy.
It is that easy. It is.
And if you needed something different than you needed, I would have helped you out. If you'd have said, Chief, I'm going to be in here for another 3 months because of X, Y, and Z, I'd have figured out some way to make that easier, either for you or your family.
Because that's what we're supposed to do. To the
human.
point of this, yeah. To the point of this whole conversation, that's what we're supposed to do.
Perfect summary.
Yeah.
Because deep down inside, inherently, I think we're all good. I did this may make you chuckle a little bit. I don't know if I shared it. I did a DEI speech for the Army Contracting Regional Command out of Arsenal, Detroit, Michigan. A lot of retired military contracting people, a lot of diversity, a lot of civilians, a lot of diverse people. And I told him, I said, well, congratulations for finally having somebody like me speak on DEI, because I've been doing it for 39 years. It started in that barracks as a squad leader in 1984, right? And I won't belabor you with the whole thing. But as I started to get questions about gender equality and religious equality and closing the gap, because this is another 25-yard gap, and closing the gap. One of the questions that came up was, it was almost like COVID. When do you think DEI is going to be over with, right? When are we not going to have a DEI office and an acronym that goes along with it and all the other things that go along with it, right? And I smiled and I said, that's not the question. The question is, how did we get to the point where we needed these things? Because we as human beings inherently have the tools and the compassion and the ability to build empathy at a level that we can have enough respect for each other that no matter what walk of life you're in, we can all live in some level of harmony. We don't have to live like this, right, where we're in it all the time, because it's not your thing. Some people hunt. Some people think that that's the most awful thing in the world. But if you have respect for each other, you don't go hunting, right? And the hunter doesn't make you look at his trophies on the wall.
Right.
Right? You just understand that. But as human beings, there's so many spaces that we can navigate together and do good things, because we're all great inside, and we're all smart at something. We all have a superpower. And when you bring all of that to bear, it's pretty powerful. But boy, we start running in solo lanes all by ourselves, lonely in whatever venue that we're in, and we get myopic and we put blinders on and we just take care of the space that we're in. Not only do we become ineffective, but then we start looking to build systems to do what should come natural as people. And then then we got a big problem.
Because we establish ourselves as silos in a field, outstanding by ourselves. There used to be that cartoon, the Far Side.
Yeah.
Right, in the newspaper, back when there were printable newspapers. And there was one where there was this cow standing on his back two legs out in this field. It was like a prairie, and he's holding balloons. And the caption said, Mr. Cow won an award for outstanding in the field. Right? But that's what he was doing. He was just standing out in a field. So that's funny, but that's what we do.
Yeah.
We put ourselves by ourselves in a silo because it's comfortable living with our own demons and not having to talk about them, because we don't want to become vulnerable. We don't want to say that we're weak. We don't want to look like we can't handle ourselves, because once again, we're supposed to be 6 feet tall or 6'6" or whatever the new is, and bulletproof.
Yeah.
And we carry the weight of whatever that single trauma was, or the accumulation of traumas over time, we carry it because we don't know what to do with it. Some of it is we carry it because we don't want to put it down for somebody else to pick up. Nobody else needs this. I don't want this. I'm not going to give it to anybody else. Right? So we don't talk about it because we're in a silo by ourselves in a field. And
and so put yourself in the position of a civilian dealing with a military person, or somebody that doesn't have, extreme or long-term mental health illnesses or traumas. Put yourself in their shoes and think about all the ambiguity and fear and pain that goes along with, I don't even know what to do. And so that's where we're at today on a variety of levels. That's where we're at. So, unfortunately, I think right now it's going to be brothers and sisters lifting up brothers and sisters, but we have got to have a gathering place to have the larger conversations and to be able to digest all of this stuff at a level that makes people comfortable to say, yeah, I need to chat.
Yeah.
I need to talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's where it starts.
And for anybody watching this or listening to this, we'll have ways for you to get a hold of both me and Chief. Yeah. We may not have the answer, but between the two of us, we know who to go to find the answer. And this good segue to put this up. You may mention this earlier. So this is the Chief's book. He's got the second copy coming out soon.
Second edition.
Second edition. If you scan the QR code, it'll take you to his website, maxfabconsulting.com, where you can learn more about Chief, what he's got going on, what he's doing, how he's doing it, and how you can help as well. And it's a good jumping off point for all things Max Fab.
Yeah. And Max Fab's in the book. So when people scratch their head on Max Fab, I'd like taking them on the journey to figure it out. It's all about the flag back here. So
it's all about that flag. And if y'all missed if you missed the first time with Chief, go back and watch it. He'll explain. The flag wasn't up in the first one. So that's the first thing I noticed when his camera turned on. I was like, Chief, you got the flag up.
Yeah, it's up there. So I got to take it down when I travel. So. And I'm going to Weber State to talk exactly this in 2 weeks with veterans that are just transitioning and the civilians that they're intermixed with. So hopefully that works out. Yeah, if you go to the website on there, you go to my Calendly. This will take you there. Go to contact us and go to my Calendly. And if you click on there, you get free 30 minutes, and it'll just load onto my calendar, and we can jump on from anywhere in the world, and I can listen to your story, and if there's something I can do to help, or if it just starts a relationship, all that stuff is just awesome. So.
For the LEOs, first responders that are watching this that may or may not have been in the military, Chief is also a very big supporter of that community. We're working in Montana and throughout the United States with law enforcement, first responders. So don't feel like if you aren't a U.S. veteran, military veteran, that you can't take part in either the QR code or reaching out to me or the Chief. That's not the case. Chief's got a lot of contacts in the LEO and first responder, firemen. I mean, he's made mention of foundation savers and their fire hoses. So. Don't feel excluded, because you're not. You're a part of this community.
And I've worked with firemen even after retirement. I worked with firemen extensively and done more of my share of riding around with cops as an emergency manager. And I led a lot of cops in the Air Force. And I'm a medic, and I rode an ambulance. So it's all there. So I mean, it's and it is a brotherhood. In public service, when you get up every day, and the second thing that's the most important is it makes you special. And then when you go through a 20-year career and you've got to go through 700, now I've got a new data point, right? You got to go through 700, critical kind of things. We know what that takes to get through that, and that's a brotherhood and understandings that go along with that. So I'm here for you, and just reach out.
I think this was a most excellent episode. Probably, not a lot of funny in it. There were some chuckles, but this was weighed heavy on both my heart and yours. To do this very podcast, to cover this very specific talking points and conversation. So, Chief, thanks for allowing me to give you the opportunity to share, and always welcome. Come back for third, fourth, fifth, sixth. There'll be a spot for you anytime you want to take it. And folks, scan the QR code, and if you need help, reach out. There's no shame. I myself finally decided that I needed more help than what I could give myself, and that was freeing in and of itself. Being in the mix of it, then getting out of it, and realizing that I wasn't out of it up here. So, Max Fab, great mentality to start living your life by. And Chief, thank you, sir.
Amen, brother. Till next time.
Until next time.
The Knock&Talk Show is a certified veteran-hosted podcast. Show your support, tune in, share, and subscribe.